The signal came on a Tuesday morning, broadcasting across every frequency known to human science. Radio stations went silent. Television screens flickered with strange patterns. Military communication systems picked up the transmission simultaneously in every country on Earth within minutes. The world's leading scientists confirmed what many had suspected but few had dared to believe. The signal was not natural. It was a message from somewhere beyond the stars. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the command center of the Global Space Agency, her coffee growing cold in her hands as she stared at the data streaming across her monitor. She had spent 20 years searching for signs of intelligent life beyond Earth. Now that it had found them instead, she felt a strange mixture of excitement and fear settling in her chest. "The signal is coming from just outside our solar system," said her colleague, Dr. Marcus Webb. He pointed at the holographic display floating above the central table. "Approximately 40 astronomical units from Earth, whatever is sending this message. It's close, very close." The translation algorithms worked faster than anyone expected. The aliens, whoever they were, had designed their message to be understood. Within hours, the brightest minds on the planet had decoded the first portion of the transmission. The message was simple, almost friendly in its tone. "We have been watching your species for some time. We are the Valdori Collective, travelers between stars, seekers of knowledge, builders of peace. We wish to make contact with the people of Earth. We will arrive at the edge of your atmosphere in 7 of your planetary rotations. Prepare yourselves. We come with gifts." The announcement split humanity down the middle. Some celebrated in the streets, believing that salvation had come from the heavens. Others prepared for the worst, convinced that any species advanced enough to travel between stars would view humans as nothing more than insects to be crushed. Governments held emergency meetings. Religious leaders offered prayers and warnings in equal measure. The stock markets crashed and recovered 3 times in a single week. Sarah found herself at the center of the storm. The Global Space Agency had chosen her to lead the first contact team, a group of scientists, diplomats, and military advisors who would represent all of humanity when the aliens arrived. It was an honor she had never sought and a responsibility she felt crushing her shoulders with every passing hour. She spent the 7 days reviewing everything humanity knew about space, about communication, about the possibility of life beyond Earth. She studied the translated portions of the alien message again and again, searching for hidden meanings or threats. She found nothing that suggested danger, but she could not shake the feeling that something important was being left unsaid. The 7th day arrived faster than anyone was ready for. Telescopes around the world focused on the coordinates the aliens had specified. At first, there was nothing but empty space and distant stars. Then, slowly, something began to emerge from the darkness. It started as a shimmer, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. The shimmer grew larger, stretching across the viewing screens until it filled the entire frame. Colors twisted and swirled in patterns that hurt the eyes to watch. Scientists later theorized that they were witnessing some form of faster-than-light travel, a technology so far beyond human understanding that it might as well have been magic. Then the shimmer cleared, and the Valdori ship became visible. Sarah heard gasps echo through the command center. She heard someone drop a tablet. She heard chairs scraping backward as people instinctively retreated from the screens, as if the image itself might reach out and grab them. She understood their reactions because she felt the same terror rising in her own throat. The alien vessel was massive beyond comprehension. Its hull stretched across the viewing screens like a metal continent floating in space. Sensor readings confirmed what their eyes could barely believe. The ship measured over 50 kilometers from bow to stern. It was larger than any human city. It was larger than some small countries. It dwarfed every spacecraft humanity had ever built combined, making the International Space Station look like a toy model by comparison. The design was elegant despite its terrifying size. Smooth curves flowed into sharp angles. Glowing lines ran along the hull like rivers of light. Strange protrusions that might have been weapons or sensors or something else entirely dotted the surface in patterns that suggested careful planning. This was not a vessel built by accident or necessity. This was a statement of power, a demonstration of what the Valdori Collective could create. "Dear God," Marcus whispered beside her, "it's a city. They've brought a flying city to our doorstep." Sarah could not respond. Her throat had gone dry, and her hands were shaking against her sides. She had imagined first contact many times throughout her career. She had pictured small probes exchanging data with Earth satellites. She had imagined radio signals carrying mathematical equations back and forth across the void. She had never imagined anything like this. The second part of the alien message arrived as the ship took its position in orbit. It was accompanied by holographic projections that appeared in major cities around the world, displaying images of alien beings for the first time. The Valdor were tall and slender, with skin that shifted colors like oil on water. Their eyes were large and dark, reflecting light in ways that made them seem wise and ancient. They wore flowing garments that moved even when they stood still, as if responding to invisible winds. "People of Earth," the holographic spokesperson announced, "we have traveled far to meet you. Our vessel, the Eternal Dawn, will remain in your orbit while we conduct peaceful exchanges. We invite your representatives to visit us aboard our ship. We promise safe passage and safe return. Let us begin a new chapter in the history of your world. The invitation sparked immediate debate. Some argued that boarding an alien vessel was suicide. Others insisted that refusing would be an insult that might provoke violence. In the end, the decision fell to Sarah and her team. They had prepared for this moment. They could not turn back now. The shuttle launched 3 days later, carrying 12 humans toward the massive alien ship. Sarah sat near the front window, watching the eternal dawn grow larger with every passing second. Details became visible that had been impossible to see from Earth. She could make out individual structures on the hull, towers and domes and what looked like landing platforms. She could see smaller vessels moving around the main ship like fish swimming around a whale. She could see lights flickering in countless windows, suggesting a population of thousands or perhaps millions living inside. The shuttle passed through an invisible barrier that made the instruments flicker momentarily. Then they were inside a hangar bay large enough to hold a sports stadium. Alien vessels of various sizes rested on the deck, none of them matching any design principles Sarah recognized. Valdori workers moved about their tasks, barely glancing at the human shuttle as it touched down. Sarah took a deep breath and released her safety harness. The moment of truth had arrived. Whatever happened next would change the course of human history forever. She could only hope that the change would be for the better. The hangar doors opened, and the smell of recycled air mixed with something sweet and unfamiliar filled the cabin. Sarah stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest, ready to greet the beings who had crossed the stars to find them. The welcoming committee consisted of 7 Valdor, each standing nearly 3 meters tall. Their color-shifting skin rippled with shades of blue and purple as they watched the humans descend from the shuttle. The leader, who introduced himself as High Speaker Velthus, moved with a grace that made human motions seem clumsy by comparison. Dr. Chen Velthus said, his voice carrying a musical quality that seemed to resonate in the air itself. We have monitored your transmissions for many cycles. We know of your work searching for life beyond your world. It pleases us that you are among the first to visit our home. Sarah forced herself to meet his dark eyes, though something ancient and powerful lurked behind them. We are honored by your invitation, High Speaker. My people have many questions. As do we, Velthus replied, gesturing for the humans to follow. Come, let us show you the eternal dawn. The tour that followed exceeded anything Sarah could have prepared for. The Valdori guided them through corridors that stretched 4 kilometers, past chambers filled with technology that defied explanation. They walked through gardens where plants from 100 different worlds grew in perfect harmony. They observed factories where raw materials were transformed into finished products by machines that operated without visible power sources. They visited libraries where the knowledge of countless civilizations had been preserved in crystal storage devices. The population of the ship numbered in the millions, Velthus explained. The Eternal Dawn was not merely a vessel but a mobile civilization, a self-sustaining ecosystem that had been traveling between stars for longer than humans had been writing history. That Valdori had encountered dozens of intelligent species throughout their journeys. They had learned from each one, absorbing their knowledge, their art, their philosophies. Your kind fascinated us from the beginning, Velthus admitted as they stood on an observation deck overlooking the vast interior of the ship. Below them, an artificial city sprawled across the deck, complete with buildings, transportation networks, and green spaces where Valdori children played without a care. Your planet is young. Your species is younger still. Yet you have progressed faster than almost any civilization we have encountered. Your wars, your struggles, your triumphs, all of it compressed into such a brief span of time. Marcus stepped forward, his scientific curiosity overcoming his initial fear. How long have you been watching us? By your calendar, approximately 2,000 of your years. We first detected your radio signals long after we began our observations. Of course, you were already building empires and writing poetry when we arrived in this region of space. The implications of that statement settled over the human delegation like a cold blanket. 2,000 years of observation meant the Valdori had watched humanity through its darkest moments and its greatest achievements. They had witnessed the rise and fall of empires. They had seen world wars and revolutions. They knew humanity's capacity for both creation and destruction. Why reveal yourselves now? Sarah asked. Why not contact us sooner? Velthus tilted his head, a gesture that somehow conveyed both amusement and respect. We do not interfere with developing species, Dr. Chen. We observe, we learn, but we do not guide. However, certain circumstances have prompted us to make an exception in your case. Before Sarah could press for details, a younger Valdori approached and whispered something in the High Speaker's ear. The color of Velthus's skin shifted suddenly, turning from calm blues to agitated oranges and reds. His expression, which had remained serene throughout the tour, darkened with something that looked uncomfortably like fear. Forgive me, Velthus said, his musical voice now carrying sharp edges. An urgent matter requires my attention. My associates will continue your tour. We will speak again soon. He departed quickly, leaving the humans with guides who seemed suddenly nervous. The remainder of the tour felt rushed. the explanations more superficial than before. Sarah noticed Valdori crew members hurrying through the corridors with concerned expressions. Something had changed aboard the Eternal Dawn, and the humans had not been told what it was that night. The delegation was given comfortable quarters in a section of the ship designed for visitors. The rooms were beautiful, filled with furniture that adjusted to human proportions and artwork that seemed to move and breathe on its own. But Sarah could not sleep. She lay awake in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling and replaying Veltus's words in her mind. Certain circumstances have prompted us to make an exception. What circumstances? Why had the Valdori broken their own rules of non-interference? What had they seen or discovered that made contact with humanity suddenly necessary? A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She found Marcus standing in the corridor, his face pale and his hands clutching a tablet. "I've been analyzing the data from our tour," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Something doesn't add up. The technology we've seen, the population figures they gave us, the layout of the ship, none of it matches the readings our shuttle captured during approach." Sarah took the tablet and studied the display. Marcus had overlaid the sensor data with a three-dimensional model of the Eternal Dawn. Large sections of the ship remained unaccounted for, hidden from their tours and shielded from human scanning technology. "What do you think is in there?" she asked. "I don't know, but look at this." He swiped to a new screen showing energy signatures from different parts of the ship. "These readings are off the charts. Whatever power source they're using, it's putting out more energy than our sun, and most of that energy is being channeled into sections we weren't allowed to see." Before they could discuss further, the entire ship shuddered. The lights flickered once, twice, then stabilized. An alarm began to sound, a low pulsing tone that seemed to vibrate in their bones. Valdori voices echoed through the corridors, speaking in their native language with obvious urgency. Sarah and Marcus rushed to the observation window just in time to see something that stopped their hearts. Space itself seemed to be tearing open a few thousand kilometers away from the ship. The blackness split like fabric being ripped by invisible hands, revealing something behind it that glowed with sickly green light. Shapes emerged from the tier, ships, if they could be called that. They were angular and jagged, covered in spines and protrusions that seemed organic rather than mechanical. They moved through space with unsettling fluidity, twisting and rolling in ways that violated every law of physics the humans understood. "What are those?" Marcus whispered. The door behind them slid open, and Velthus stepped into the room. His skin had turned completely black, a color the humans had not seen on any Valdori before. His face carried an expression of grim determination that answered their questions before he spoke. "Those are the reason we came to your system, Dr. Chen. Those are the enemies we have been running from for 10,000 years, and now they have found us again." The alien vessels numbered in the hundreds, spreading out from the tier in space like insects emerging from a hive. They moved toward the Eternal Dawn with obvious hostile intent, weapon systems already glowing with terrible energy. "Who are they?" Sarah demanded. "What do they want?" Velthus turned to face her, and for the first time, she saw fear in his ancient eyes. "They are called the Harvesters. They consume civilizations, absorb their technology, and add their populations to their collective. They cannot be reasoned with, cannot be appeased. They have been hunting my people across the galaxy for millennia, and now, Dr. Chen, they will learn of your world as well." The first weapon's fire lit up the darkness of space, and Sarah understood with terrible clarity why the Valdori had finally decided to make contact. They had not come to Earth bearing gifts. They had come seeking allies, because the war that had destroyed countless worlds across the galaxy had finally arrived at humanity's doorstep. The battle erupted with a violence that shook the Eternal Dawn to its core. Energy weapons blazed through space, painting the darkness with colors that had no names in human languages. The Valdori ship returned fire with massive cannons that extended from hidden ports along its hull, each blast powerful enough to shatter a moon. But the Harvester vessels were many, and they moved with terrible coordination. Sarah gripped the handrail as another explosion sent tremors through the deck, through the observation window. She watched a Harvester ship ram directly into the Eternal Dawn's shields, sacrificing itself to weaken the barrier for the vessels behind it. The shields flickered and held, but cracks of darkness appeared in the glowing protective field. "They're going to overwhelm you," she said to Vel. "There are too many of them." "Yes," the High Speaker agreed. His voice remained calm despite the chaos around them. "The Eternal Dawn is powerful, but we have always avoided direct confrontation with Harvester fleets of this size. We prefer to run, to hide, to live another day. But running brought us here, to your system. We have no more room to retreat." Marcus studied the tactical display that had appeared on the wall. "Your weapons are barely making a dent in their numbers. For every ship you destroy, 3 more come through that portal. The tier will remain open as long as the Harvester command vessel exists," Velthus explained. "It maintains the bridge between normal space and the void dimension where they travel. If we could destroy it, the portal would collapse, and the remaining Harvesters would be stranded." "Then why don't you target the command vessel?" Sarah asked. Velthus pointed to a massive shape lurking behind the swarm of smaller ships. It was enormous, nearly as large as the Eternal Dawn itself, and it pulsed with the same sickly green light that leaked from the dimensional tear. The command vessel is protected by the entire fleet. We cannot reach it. We have tried many times in many battles. We have never succeeded. The conversation was interrupted by another massive impact. This time the shields did not hold. A section of the protective barrier collapsed, and harvester weapons fire struck the hull directly. Alarms screamed throughout the ship. Automated systems began sealing off damaged sections while repair drones rushed to assess the breach. Dr. Chen Velthos said, turning to face her with an expression of profound regret, "I must be honest with you now. When we came to your system, we hoped to form an alliance. We believed that if the harvesters followed us here, perhaps humanity could provide fresh resources, fresh soldiers for the fight. We did not tell you this because we knew you would refuse." Sarah felt anger rising in her chest, hot and justified. "You led them here. You put Earth in danger without warning us. Yes, and I am sorry. But understand that the harvesters would have found your world eventually. They sweep through the galaxy, consuming everything in their path. Your species had perhaps a few centuries before they arrived naturally. We have merely accelerated the timeline and given you a chance to prepare." "A chance to prepare," Marcus shouted. "How can we prepare for this? We don't have weapons that can scratch those ships. Our entire space fleet couldn't match a single one of your escort vessels." Velthus nodded slowly. "You are correct. In terms of conventional warfare, humanity cannot match the harvesters. But perhaps there are other ways." Before he could elaborate, a communication screen activated nearby. A Valdori officer appeared, speaking rapidly in their native tongue. Velthus listened, and the black color of his skin seemed to deepen somehow, becoming absolute absence of light. "The harvesters have broken through our secondary shields," he translated for the humans. "They are boarding the ship. Our internal defenses are activating, but the harvesters adapt quickly. They will reach critical systems within hours." Sarah made a decision in that moment, one that would define the rest of her life. "Get me communication with Earth, right now." Velthus seemed surprised by her demand but complied. Within minutes, Sarah was speaking directly to the emergency command center in Geneva, where every government leader on the planet had gathered to monitor the situation. She explained what was happening, what the Valdori had done, and what humanity now faced. The response was predictable outrage, followed by panic, followed by desperate questions about what could be done. "Listen to me carefully," Sarah said, cutting through the chaos. "The Valdori have technology we can barely understand, but they also have limitations. They have been fighting this war for 10,000 years and losing. Maybe they need something they don't have. Maybe they need us." The human military commanders began sharing information rapidly. Tactical data flowed from Earth to the Eternal Dawn and back again. Valdori technicians observed human problem-solving methods with growing interest. Within an hour, a plan began to take shape, one that combined Valdori technology with human creativity. "Your species thinks differently than ours," Velthus observed as he watched human strategists work. "We approach problems systematically, methodically. We test hypotheses and refine solutions over centuries. You simply throw ideas against the wall and see what sticks. It is chaotic. It is inefficient. It is effective." Sarah suggested. "Unpredictable," Velthus corrected. "The harvesters adapt to any threat they understand, but they cannot adapt to what they cannot predict." The plan was insane by any rational measure. Human military engineers proposed using Valdori teleportation technology to send nuclear warheads directly inside harvester vessels, bypassing their shields entirely. Valdori scientists had considered this approach centuries ago and dismissed it, because the teleportation systems could not be calibrated precisely enough to avoid detection. Human hackers examined the Valdori systems and found ways to introduce random variables that made the teleportation signatures impossible to track, even at the cost of reduced reliability. "This will only work once," Marcus warned. "After the first wave of attacks, the harvesters will adapt. They'll find ways to block teleportation entirely. Then we make the first wave count." Sarah replied. The Eternal Dawn trembled again as harvester boarding parties cut through interior walls. Valdori security forces engaged the invaders with weapons that dissolved matter at the molecular level, but the harvesters kept coming, wave after wave of twisted beings that had once belonged to other species, now merged into a single horrifying collective consciousness. Time was running out. The hybrid teleportation system was assembled using components from both civilizations. 50 nuclear warheads were prepared, each one powerful enough to destroy an aircraft carrier. They seemed pitiful compared to the Valdori weapons that could crack planets, but they were what humanity had to offer. "Target the command vessel," Sarah ordered. "Everything we have, all at once." The Valdori operators hesitated, looking to Velthus for confirmation. The high speaker met Sarah's eyes for a long moment, searching for something. Whatever he found satisfied him. "Do as she says. The humans have earned the right to try." The teleportation sequence initiated. 50 warheads vanished from the Eternal Dawn's cargo bay, scattered across the unpredictable pathways that human chaos had introduced into Valdori precision. For 3 heartbeats nothing happened. Then the darkness of space bloomed with 50 new suns as the nuclear weapons detonated inside the Harvester command vessel, tearing it apart from within. The dimensional tier flickered and collapsed. Harvester ships that had been streaming through suddenly found themselves cut off from their reinforcements. The Eternal Dawn's weapons, freed from the need to hold back the endless tide, focused their firepower on the remaining enemy vessels with devastating effect. Sarah watched the battle turn, watched the impossible become possible, and allowed herself a single moment of hope. The victory came at tremendous cost. The Eternal Dawn had sustained catastrophic damage during the battle. The entire sections of the massive vessel had been breached, exposed to the vacuum of space. Thousands of Valdori had died fighting the boarding parties that had made it inside before the command vessel's destruction. The ship that had traveled between stars for millennia now drifted wounded in orbit around Earth, its engines struggling to maintain position. Sarah stood in the medical bay watching. Valdor healers tend to both their own wounded and the human delegation members who had been injured during the fighting. The technology was remarkable, capable of repairing injuries that would have been fatal on Earth. But even Valdora medicine could not bring back the dead. Velthus found her there, his skin now cycling through muted shades of gray that the humans had learned to associate with grief. Your plan worked, Dr. Chen. For the first time in 10,000 years, we have won a decisive victory against the Harvesters. The collective will feel this loss. Will they come back? Sarah asked. The question had been weighing on her mind since the last Harvester vessel had been destroyed. Eventually, yes. The Harvesters never forget an enemy. They will analyze what happened here, develop countermeasures, and return with even greater force. But that will take time. Perhaps decades. Perhaps a century. Your species has bought itself a chance to prepare. Sarah laughed bitterly. A century ago, we hadn't even achieved powered flight. Now we're expected to prepare for an interstellar war. A century is a very long time for your species. Consider how much you have accomplished in that span. Now imagine what you might achieve with access to Valdor knowledge and technology. The implications of that statement lingered in the air between them. Sarah had seen what the Valdor possessed. She had walked through their libraries, observed their factories, witnessed their weapons in action. If that technology was shared with humanity, the world would change forever. Why would you share anything with us? She asked. We're primitives compared to you. We can barely reach our own moon consistently. Velthos considered the question carefully before answering. Today you demonstrated something that the Valdori lost long ago. Dr. Chen, you showed us what it means to be reckless. To take risks that no rational species would consider. To throw yourself into the darkness without knowing if you will survive. We have become too careful, too methodical. We have spent so long running from the Harvesters that we forgot how to fight them. He gestured toward the viewport where the blue curve of Earth was visible against the stars. Your world is small and fragile. Your species is young and divided. By every measure we use to evaluate civilizations, you should be insignificant. And yet you succeeded where we have failed countless times. Perhaps there is something in your chaos, your unpredictability, that the galaxy needs. The communication from Earth came while Sarah was still processing Velthis's words. The world's governments had been watching the battle through the Eternal Dawn's transmitted feeds. They had seen humanity's weapons turn the tide against an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for longer than human civilization had existed. The political landscape that had been fractured by nations and ideologies suddenly found common ground in the face of a shared threat. Dr. Chen, the director of the Global Space Agency, said through the communication screen, the Security Council has reached a consensus. We want to negotiate a formal alliance with the Valdori Collective. Whatever resources we have, whatever cooperation they need, we're prepared to offer. Sarah relayed the message to Velthus, who received it with what might have been a smile on his alien features. Tell your leaders that we accept, but warn them that this alliance will demand everything they have. The Harvesters will not underestimate humanity a second time. The negotiations began immediately, conducted simultaneously aboard the Eternal Dawn and in conference rooms around Earth. Valdori representatives met with human scientists, sharing fundamental principles of their technology, while human engineers proposed innovative applications that the Valdor had never considered. The exchange was not one-sided. Humanity had much to learn, but they also had much to offer. Marcus became obsessed with Valdori propulsion systems, spending every waking hour studying the principles that allowed the Eternal Dawn to travel faster than light. He proposed modifications based on human theoretical physics that made the Valdori engineers pause and reconsider assumptions they had held for centuries. Your mathematics approaches the problem differently, one of the Valdori scientists admitted. You model chaos as a factor to be accounted for rather than eliminated. This leads to solutions that are less elegant but more robust. Meanwhile, on Earth, military leaders were grappling with the reality of what humanity now faced. The Harvesters would return. The question was not if but when. Every nation began shifting resources towards space defense programs. Old rivalries were set aside as the survival of the entire species took priority over territorial disputes. Sarah watched these changes unfold with a mixture of hope and concern. Humanity was unifying in the face of an external threat, something that philosophers had predicted for centuries. But unification brought its own dangers. Power was concentrating in new institutions. Decisions were being made behind closed doors that would affect every person on the planet. She brought these concerns to Velthus during one of their regular meetings. My people are changing too fast. We're not ready for this kind of transformation. I'm afraid of what we might become in the process of trying to survive. Velthus nodded slowly, his skin shifting to thoughtful blues and greens. Every species that encounters the harvesters faces this choice. Some collapse under the pressure, their societies fragmenting before the enemy even arrives. Others become rigid and militaristic, sacrificing everything that made them unique in pursuit of survival. A few find a balance, preserving their core identities while adapting to new realities. Which path do you think humanity will take? I do not know, Dr. Chen. That is for your species to decide. But I can tell you this, that Valdori have preserved ourselves for 10,000 years by running and hiding. We have survived, but we have paid a price for that survival. We have become cautious to the point of paralysis, methodical to the point of stagnation. Today, watching your species improvise a solution that should not have worked, I felt something I had not experienced in centuries. I felt hope. The repairs to the Eternal Dawn progressed slowly. Valdori construction drones worked alongside human engineers who were learning to operate alien equipment with surprising speed. The damage was severe, but the ship would fly again. More importantly, the collaboration between species was producing innovations that neither could have achieved alone. Human computer scientists developed new interface systems that allowed technology to be controlled more intuitively. Valdori material scientists created alloys that could be manufactured using Earth's industrial base. Military strategists from both species wargamed scenarios, each learning from the other's strengths and weaknesses. Sarah found herself at the center of this exchange, translating not just languages but ways of thinking. She became the bridge between two civilizations, helping humans understand Valdori caution and helping Valdori appreciate human boldness. It was exhausting work, but she had never felt more alive. 3 months after the battle, the Eternal Dawn's engines hummed back to life. The massive ship rose from its orbit around Earth, its hull still bearing the scars of combat but its systems fully operational. Velthos invited Sarah to the command bridge for the restart ceremony. Standing beside her as the stars came into focus through the main viewport, "We will remain in your system," he announced to both Valdori and human audiences. "The Eternal Dawn will serve as a training ground for human crews and a base for joint operations. Together we will prepare for what is coming." Sarah looked out at the stars, knowing that somewhere in that vast darkness, the harvesters were already planning their revenge. The galaxy was far larger and more dangerous than humanity had ever imagined. But for the first time in their history, humans were not facing that danger alone. The real work was about to begin. 50 years passed in a blur of progress and preparation. Sarah Chen, now an old woman with gray hair and weathered hands, stood on the observation deck of humanity's first city-sized starship, the Unity. The vessel had been built in orbit around Mars, assembled by millions of workers over 3 decades, incorporating the best of both Valdori and human engineering. It was smaller than the Eternal Dawn, but faster, more maneuverable, and armed with weapons that had been specifically designed to counter harvester technology. The Unity was not alone. Around it floated a fleet of over 1,000 vessels of various sizes, the combined naval force of the United Earth Federation. Fighter craft designed by human pilots who had trained aboard Valdori cruisers built in orbital shipyards that had not existed when Sarah first stepped aboard the Eternal Dawn, carriers that launched drones controlled by artificial intelligences that human and Valdori programmers had developed together. Humanity had transformed itself in half a century. The old nations still existed in name, but their borders had become administrative conveniences rather than barriers. Resources flowed to wherever they were needed. Scientists from every continent collaborated in research stations scattered throughout the solar system. Children learned about the galaxy in schools where Valdori teachers worked alongside human educators. The changes had not been easy. There had been protests, rebellions, entire regions that resisted the new order. Some people longed for the simpler days before the aliens arrived, before the threat of extinction loomed over every decision. But most had accepted the necessity of change. The alternative was too terrible to contemplate. Sarah had retired from active duty 20 years ago, but she retained her title as Special Ambassador and remained involved in the Alliance's strategic planning. She had watched Marcus discover fundamental flaws in Valdori faster-than-light theory and propose corrections that allowed ships to travel twice as fast. She had watched young engineers develop shield technology that the Valdori themselves admitted was superior to their own designs. She had watched humanity grow from a species that could barely leave its own planet to a civilization that was beginning to matter on the galactic stage. Today, all of that preparation would be tested. The harvesters had returned, The dimensional tier had opened 3 days ago at the edge of the solar system, exactly as the Valdori had predicted. But the fleet that emerged was nothing like the force that had attacked 50 years ago. The harvesters had learned from their defeat. They had adapted, evolved, built new weapons and new ships designed specifically to counter the hybrid technology that had destroyed their command vessel. Their fleet numbered in the tens of thousands, massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed even the Eternal Dawn, swarms of smaller attack craft that moved in perfect synchronization, and at the center of the formation, a command vessel so large that it registered on sensors as a small moon. The Valdori had offered to retreat, to take the Eternal Dawn and flee to another system, drawing the harvesters away from Earth. High Speaker Vel, who had become something like a friend to Sarah over the decades, had personally recommended evacuation. "Your species has grown strong," he had said during their final meeting before the battle. "But you are not ready for this. The harvesters have been preparing for 50 years. They will not underestimate you again." Sarah had refused. "We're not running. This is our home, and we'll defend it." Belthus had smiled, a human expression he had learned to adopt over the years. "I expected nothing less." "Very well, Dr. Chen. Let us show the harvesters what two civilizations fighting together can accomplish." The battle began when the harvester fleet crossed the orbit of Neptune. Human and Valdori vessels moved to intercept, forming defensive lines that stretched across millions of kilometers. The first exchange of weapons fire was devastating, with losses mounting rapidly on both sides, but the Alliance forces held their positions, refusing to yield ground that had been bought with decades of preparation. Sarah watched a tactical display from the Unity's command bridge, where the current fleet commanders directed the battle. She recognized many of them, former students who had trained under her guidance, officers who had served with her during the early years of the Alliance. They were good people, brave people, and they were dying by the hundreds as the harvesters pressed their attack. "We need to take out that command vessel," Admiral Chen said. He was Sarah's nephew, named after her brother who had died during the first battle 50 years ago. "As long as it exists, they can keep bringing in reinforcements through the dimensional tear." "The same strategy won't work twice," Belthus warned. "They've developed countermeasures against teleportation attacks. Our sensors show shielding that blocks any form of instantaneous transport." Admiral Chen smiled grimly. "Then we won't use teleportation. We'll do it the old-fashioned way." The plan was pure human insanity. A volunteer crew would pilot the Unity directly into the heart of the harvester formation, using its speed and maneuverability to evade enemy fire while the rest of the fleet provided covering support. Once in range, the Unity would launch a concentrated assault on the command vessel's shield generators, creating an opening for a decisive strike. The chances of success were estimated at less than 5%. The chances of survival for the Unity's crew were even lower. "I'll go," Sarah said, surprising everyone on the bridge. "Ambassador Chen, with respect." "You're 83 years old," Admiral Chen objected. "And I'm the best qualified person to operate the Valdora systems we'll need," she replied. "I've been working with their technology since before you were born. Besides, this is my fight. It always has been." Belthus stepped forward, his skin shifting to colors that Sarah had learned to recognize as deep affection. "Then I will accompany you, old friend. Let us finish what we started together." The Unity launched its attack as the rest of the fleet intensified their assault on the harvester flanks. The city-sized starship accelerated toward the enemy formation, its weapons blazing continuously as it carved a path through the swarm of interceptors. Sarah worked the control panels with hands that shook but never faltered, directing power to shields and weapons with the precision of 5 decades of experience. The harvesters threw everything they had at the Unity: energy beams that could slice through asteroids, missiles that tracked their target with relentless determination, boarding pods that latched onto the hull and began cutting through. The ship's crew fought back with weapons and improvised defenses, holding the line while the bridge crew focused on the mission. They broke through the final defensive perimeter with half their weapons disabled and hull breaches on 3 decks. The harvester command vessel loomed before them, filling the viewports with its massive bulk. Sarah could see the dimensional tear behind it, a wound in space that bled green light into the void. "Target the shield generators," she ordered. "Everything we have left." The Unity's remaining weapons fired in unison, concentrating their power on the precise points that Valdori intelligence had identified as vulnerabilities. The command vessel's shields flickered and failed, exposing the organic mechanical hull beneath. "Now," Belthus said quietly, "it is time." Sarah activated the final protocol, one that had been designed for exactly this moment. The Unity's engines overloaded deliberately, channeling all remaining power into a single devastating beam that lanced forward like a spear of pure light. The beam struck the command vessel's core, triggering a chain reaction that could not be stopped. The explosion consumed everything. The command vessel shattered into billions of fragments. The dimensional tier collapsed with a thunderclap that echoed across the entire solar system. Harvester ships that had been streaming through found themselves cut off, stranded, vulnerable. The Unity emerged from the blast wave battered but intact, its crew alive against all odds. Sarah sat back in her chair, her ancient bones aching but her heart full of triumph. They had done it, against every prediction, every calculation, every rational expectation. They had won. The remaining harvester vessels were hunted down over the following weeks. Not a single enemy ship escaped to report what had happened. For the first time in 10,000 years, the harvesters had been dealt a defeat so absolute that they would never recover. Velthus stood beside Sarah as they watched the cleanup operations from the Unity's observation deck. His skin glowed with colors she had never seen before, patterns of joy and wonder and renewed purpose. "Your species has changed the galaxy today, Dr. Chen," he said softly. "The harvesters are broken. Other civilizations that have been hiding from them for millennia will emerge. A new era is beginning, and humanity will lead it." Sarah smiled, thinking of all the people who had made this moment possible. The scientists who had worked through the night for decades, the soldiers who had given their lives in training and in battle, the ordinary citizens who had accepted extraordinary sacrifices to ensure their children would have a future. "We didn't do it alone," she said. "We never could have. But when we work together, when we combine what we know with what others know, there's nothing we can't accomplish." The stars stretched out before them, billions upon billions of worlds waiting to be explored.